everybody, and welcome to the Feminine Principle Podcast, astrology for authentic living. My name is Mel with Energetic Principles.
And I'm Shawna with Neo Feminine Astrology.
And in this episode, we'll be discussing the astrology for the week of November 13th, and what we have titled, Exploring Powerful Mysteries. The purpose of this podcast is to give inspiration and guidance for this week with real-life examples of what to expect.
The three major aspects that we'll talk about this week are Venus conjunct Jupiter in Scorpio, which is about intriguing mysteries. We'll also talk about Mercury square Neptune and Venus trine Neptune, which is about spiritually connecting head and heart. And lastly, we'll talk about Mercury sextile Mars, Mars square Pluto, and the new moon in Scorpio. Oh my. So this is all about massive ambition. And as always, please remember that some of these aspects will influence you more than others based on what's literally happening in your life right now and your personal astrological makeup. So notice what resonates with you most and always use your intuition and your logic to decide what's best for you.
Yes, because you know you best. So yeah, Shawna, let's kick off this week's episode with a quick rundown of the moon's path through the zodiac and some other minor aspects for you astro geeks out there. Well, our lunar lady is going to start off the week in the tail end of her waning cycle as she moves out of Virgo and into the balancing energy of Libra. On Thursday, she's going to be her darkest as she moves through the intensity of Scorpio, where she'll make her way to the new moon conjunction on Saturday, which of course we are going to discuss in much more detail later in the episode. So within the hours of the conjunction of the new moon, she's actually going to carry on into big picture Sagittarius, where we will close out the week. So Shawna, share with us who we're going to feature for this week's quotes.
So this episode features quotes and inspiration from the book called Dancing in the Flames, The Dark Goddess in the Transformation of Consciousness by Marianne Woodman. Marianne Woodman and Eleanor Dixon. So these are such important topics for this week's astrology, especially the last segment that we'll talk about involving a lot of Pluto and Mars and Scorpio energy.
Yes. And it's going to be quite a week, I have a feeling.
Yes. So we're excited to jump into these transits with you. One last note before we do, a shout out to our new patrons. Shout out to Latoya, Olivia, and Alicia.
Yes. Thank you so much for signing up, guys. And I do want to give an additional shout out to Latoya and Olivia for the wonderful comments that they made on our patron page. We definitely appreciate that.
Yeah. Super sweet.
Yes.
And so when they signed up, they got our super cool show notes. You can sign up to be a patron if you're interested in that, to get the show notes every single week with all of the details of each episode. So that includes specific dates, tarot cards that Mel pulls, the quotes that we've selected, and reflection questions. So by becoming a patron of the podcast, you can do that on, you can find out more about that on our Facebook page and Instagram under Feminine Principle Podcast, or you can also go to feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com.
Yes, and we would love to have you. So let's get started here, Shawna. We got so many aspects to talk about. It was almost hard to put together this week, but So let's dive in there. So the first transit we're going to talk about is Venus, who is going to be conjunct Jupiter in Scorpio, and what we are titling Intriguing Mysteries. And some exacts on that will be happening Monday, November 13th at 12:15 a.m. Pacific time, which is 8:15 a.m. Universal time, and 6:15 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that conjunction is going to happen at 7 degrees Scorpio. So Shawna, kick us in with your first quote.
So in this quote, the author is speaking about a dream that someone has had that involves this beautiful light. So she says, in her searching, she finds the light, but it is light embodied in matter. the gold sparks that appear where she touches the black walls. This is the light, the consciousness within our own bodies as well as within all creation that will be recognized and released as we continue to evolve. The embodied light reveals itself in the feminine threesome, mother, maiden, crone. Out of the darkness will come the treasures and the hidden riches. And so I thought this was so sweet and beautiful for Venus and Jupiter together in the sign of Scorpio, because Venus is the feminine. Jupiter allows us to expand upon that and to explore new ways of being within the feminine. And then this is all happening within the sign of Scorpio. So it's happening in a Scorpio kind of way, which means that we're really looking at the dark goddess. And typically we have a negative connotation of the dark, but the dark, especially the dark goddess, can actually be so beautiful and so powerful. And I love, like she says, that you can actually find the hidden riches in the dark, and there's actually light that sparkles within the dark. And that's what Scorpio is all about.
I love that, Shawna. And you just brought up, I'm going to kind of segue in a story real quick, just because you brought up a memory of a dream that I had several years ago. And I think it really plays into what you're talking about, and that sparkling within the dark. And in the dream, if in case any of you listeners don't know, I'm a Scorpio rising. So there's definitely some Scorpio energy here. But in the dream, I kept going through this period in my life where I was having dreams where I would be trying to cook something, and I would cook it, but before I could eat it, it was either eaten by someone else or it disappeared or whatever, and so this is a very spiritual type of thing. Whatever I was doing in my life at the time wasn't nourishing me spiritually. And so I had this dream where I was in this house and I was cooking macaroni and cheese for everyone. And then I went to go eat it. And of course, everyone gobbled it up before I could. So I was frustrated and I decided to go outside in the dream. And I walk outside and I'm on this beach at nighttime, and the night sky is like this perfect midnight blue. Like it was just like indigo glowing. And I'm on the beach and I can see within the sand, I start to see these little sparkles. And I'm like, what is that? And so I go closer to the sand. And as I get closer and start to kind of like dig a little bit and move my toes in it, I realize that underneath the sand are all these precious gems. There's diamonds and ruby and emeralds. And it was like they were shining up from the sand in this darkness because it was pitch black in the dream. Well, it wasn't pitch black. It was just lit by this indigo coloring. And that's exactly what I think about your quote is like, here I was in this darkest hour. I couldn't get the nourishment I needed. I decided to step out the door, I stepped out into this greater landscape to search for something beyond where I was. And I found in the dark this buried treasure in a sense. So I kind of enlighten that to Scorpio, and especially Jupiter in Scorpio, and and the Venus conjunction here, and unearthing those treasures that are hidden underneath.
Oh my gosh, I love what a sweet and special and beautiful dream, Mel. I love dreams like that because when I have a dream like that, it always feels like a gift from the universe in some way. It really did. Like I woke up just in awe of the visual that I had seen. Like the gems were just so bright and so beautiful and so magnificent and just shining, and it was so funny. It was hidden the whole time and I had no idea it was there. And it finally revealed itself to me, which is so funny. And that's around the time I got into a lot of things that we're doing now, like what Shawna and I are discussing, spiritual aspects, astrology, divination, going deeper within oneself with their own self-analysis. So it was quite perfect. But yes, so not to digress too much on that, but I just remembered it and it seemed to go really well with your quote.
So, yeah.
and I think that is something like that kind of theme, like feeling as though we're not getting what it is that we need and we're needing more, and then somehow unexpectedly finding these gifts in a dark place. I think that's something that we may be feeling around this time, because Scorpio does have like a more like intense and dark and brooding kind of energy, but Venus and Jupiter, it is about like gifts, and it is about like exploring something that can be deeply meaningful and also really beautiful at the same time.
Yes. And, because we are talking about our two benefics here, Venus and Jupiter. These are what bring good things to our lives. And when it's in Scorpio, especially because Venus in Scorpio is not in its best place, it's in its fall. She doesn't do as well there. But that doesn't mean she doesn't bring gifts. And so I'm wondering, Shawna, if maybe the gift is actually a gift that we might not see immediately as a gift. You know what I mean? You know how things happen in your life, and it might not seem like it's beneficial in the beginning. And if anything, it might seem like it's a little unbeneficial. But because of it, it leads you to this place that has those riches buried in the sand, So what do you think about that? The possibility of something benefic within a potential of not so much so.
That reminds me of there's a certain book that I got as a gift, and it was called Gifts Wrapped in Unexpected Wrapping Paper or something like that.
Packages.
Unexpected packages, something. But yeah, I feel that I have felt that about a lot of things in my life, where in the moment it's not very pleasant, but then maybe after the fact you're like, woo, like I'm glad that totally changed me, and I'm really happy that happened. I think that's something that can happen a lot when Scorpio is around, like maybe where it feels a little bit prickly. But I don't know. I feel like it really depends on how comfortable a person is with looking at their darkness, with looking at psychological things and behavior patterns, and looking at the darker side of life. And if someone is very comfortable with that, or at least like they're like, okay, I don't love it, but I know that it's important, I think this could be really beautiful. I think if someone is more comfortable with avoiding those kinds of issues, that's where it might be like something where you're like, whoa, I didn't expect this to happen.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's very astute. That's quite possible. So yeah, it's just, and that's really, you could take that key of advice really through the whole Scorpio season, not just with this Venus conjunct Jupiter. It's just the idea of Scorpio, especially since we have not only Venus, who's now in Scorpio, with Jupiter, we have the sun there. So we have a bunch of planets cruising through the sign of darkness in a sense, but they're all benefic planets. So we got the sun, we got Jupiter, we got Venus, we have this uplifting energy, we have this light energy, we have this benefic energy that is essentially coming to raise us out of the dark in some way in our lives, I think. So that being said, we're also starting a cycle here, right? Venus conjunct Jupiter last happened late August of last year, August 27th, 2016 at 27 degrees Virgo, which I have to say, Shawna, is very interesting because when we have that Venus conjunction with Jupiter, the moon is actually going to be in the late degrees of Virgo. Yeah, and it's going to be square Saturn, so there is that kind of emotional intensity around some of the things that may feel more restricted in our lives, especially around like our bigger picture ideals and dreams and where we're trying to go here, where that moon is kind of challenging the specifics of that, but it's very appropriate with this, benefic conjunction. So, Shawna, what do you think about that? How we have the moon essentially in the place of our last conjunction point?
Yeah. So That's interesting because I think it could have two different effects. Number one, it could kind of remind us around whatever it is that we started around that time in late August 2016 and be like, oh yeah, like that was really, wow, how far have I come since that time? And then I think also the moon in Virgo can lend itself to a bit of more practical thinking, more analytical thinking, and I would say during this time to be really gentle with ourselves too, because Virgo can be more critical, and so yeah, I would say that it's like we may be like very focused on what it is that we're moving towards and what it is that we want to create,
which is the perfect segue into our tarot cards. Yes, good job, Shawna. So let's talk about these tarot cards real quick, kind of playing into what she was just saying, because what I drew for Venus conjunct Jupiter in Scorpio is strength as the focus and the Eight of Pentacles as the grounding. And really it kind of plays into what Shawna was just saying, being more practical, and having the strength to basically, carry on our dedication. Courage is being asked of us in some way, to continue being dedicated to what's necessary in our lives, especially if it has to do with like increased, material security or within our own self-esteem. So we are finding some type of dedication within this conjunction, I think, and especially with that moon in Virgo square Saturn, how we're using our skills is really coming up right now in our own sense of mastery. So, Shawna, how do you see these two cards put together?
Yeah, so these are really interesting. I love the Strength card because it is a reminder that the power that we need to carry on is inside of us always. And that's a reminder from Scorpio as well. Scorpio is like, hey, listen, you have all of the resources that you need on the inside. And it doesn't matter what's happening around you. Like, you got this. You're totally good. And I feel that from the Strength card. And the Eight of Pentacles is like, at the same time, what are you doing to move forward? And what are you doing? This goes along like you were saying, Mel, with the Virgo moon. What are you doing every single day to move toward what it is that you want? And what are you doing every single day to make sure that that you're in a healthy space that is growth inducing, that is nourishing, that basically like taking your spiritual vitamins in a practical way. And so that could be like surrounding ourselves with influences that are positive, that make us think, that are uplifting, but also intriguing at the same time, and cutting away drama and things like that.
Yeah. And just staying focused and to where it is, what we're trying to do, and find strength within that. Because it's, with the Eight of Pentacles, sometimes it's about like learning certain life lessons. And we, in order to do that, sometimes we need tedious repetition of them, we have to learn things over and over again. But we also have to allow ourselves to learn things, because that's where the ego, and that's because Strength card can be assigned to the ego a lot of times, and we're actually finding our own strength by taming the beast, in a sense. So what I would say is that if there are some certain lessons coming in that you need to repeat, don't let your ego hold you back from trying again. Because sometimes when we fail, we don't try again, because our ego is like, oh, well, I'm not going to look stupid again, or I'm not going to be this, or, And so I guess what I'm saying is, to integrate that shadow through our own inner strength. And what Shawna was just talking about with Scorpio, and how you have all those resources. There's so much inner strength when Scorpio is around. So don't let any type of ego considerations hold you back from continually trying to ground what it is you're working towards. And just, getting in a better place, humbly, I guess I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that also speaks to the fact that both Venus and Jupiter are meeting at pretty early in the sign of Scorpio. It's at 7 degrees of Scorpio, and so it's like, okay, we're just getting into whatever it is that we're working on. And so as Jupiter moves through the whole entire sign of Scorpio over the next year, we get to refine that.
Yes, because this is a moment in time that is starting up the beginning of something. So regardless of what happens around this time, and chances are you might feel it before you even listen to this podcast because it's happening right in the beginning of the week. Yeah, you'll see its effects as it goes through the cycle over the next year or so. So yeah, I think it's just setting us up for a cycle to where we can hopefully find some beneficial outcome within the diving deep into the Scorpio realm and the darkness and seeing what, as Shawna and I were saying earlier, what jewels and light, lies beneath. What treasures are hidden. So that being said, a couple questions to take away for Venus conjunct Jupiter. I'd ask myself, now that Venus, Jupiter, and the Sun are all in Scorpio, what intriguing mysteries are being discovered? What is surfacing out of the dark? I would ask, where is my heart's desire calling? How can I open myself up to the growth I am being led to? And then lastly, I would ask myself, how can I make the necessary changes in life to strengthen my skills through increased dedication and fixed purpose? Can I tame the beast inside to make use of this fortuitous connection?
Nice.
So let's see if we can tame that beast.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so let's move on to our next transits, paratransits actually we have here. And so let's talk about Mercury square Neptune and Venus trine Neptune in what we are titling Spiritually Connecting Head and Heart. And so some exacts here, we are going to have Mercury square Neptune on Monday, November 13th at 2:49 p.m. Pacific time, which is 10:49 p.m. Universal Time, and Tuesday, the 14th, at 8:49 a.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And that square is going to happen at 11 degrees Sagittarius and Pisces. And then we have Venus, who's going to trine Neptune a little later in the week on Thursday, November 16th at 7:21 a.m. Pacific Time, which is 3:21 p.m. Universal Time, and Friday the 17th at 1:21 a.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And the trine is going to happen at 11 degrees Scorpio and Pisces. So Shawna, kick us in with your next quote.
So she says, we unconsciously project onto others what is in our own unconscious. We may fall in love with the person who carries the projection, in which case we are bound to our own projected image. As we become conscious, we recognize and take responsibility for the aspects of ourselves that the other person has carried. And so I really liked this for this combination of Mercury and Venus connecting with Neptune, because Mercury is our mind, our thought process. Venus is how we relate with each other, our relationships. And then Neptune is about the unconscious, and Neptune can spiritualize things, but Neptune can also involve our projections and how it is that we see what it is that we want to see versus what is the actual reality. And it can make us question reality sometimes too. And so all of this quote really talks about how we see people sometimes more in the light either that we want to see them or unconsciously how it is that we want to see them. And so I think with this transit, we're like maybe looking at all of that, and it may be a little bit difficult to separate what it is, which is naturally Neptune, but lots of energy around how it is that we see people and what is reality and what it is that we're wanting to see because of something that's inside of us, not necessarily what that person actually is.
Shawna, what is reality? Asks a Neptunian person.
That's like the Neptune question.
It is, because it's true, and I think that quote is so apropos in the last couple sentences you just said as well. Kind of working within that projection, and how often it is that we pick up the projections of others, or we perceive the projection of another person. Here we are talking about Mercury, and that projection is in fact reflecting our own our own inner stuff. And I'm sure we're all guilty of it at some point in our lives, where we completely judge a person out of character because we are looking through our own glasses that are a little bit foggy, because they're attuned to our own inner guidelines, and so we just assume that other people are like thinking the same thing or feeling the same thing or what have you, but really, like you said, Shawna, it's just that reflection, and whether it's kind of a bad thing or it's a good thing that you're seeing in another person. Like if it's a good thing and it's not accurately reflecting them, that's a form of wishful thinking. And if it's a bad thing, and that maybe they're not even exhibiting this thing that you're contributing to as bad, it like Shawna was just saying, it has something to do with that inner projection that is really asking for you to take a look at, to get a little clearer on. And that's the thing with Neptune, is it's not necessarily clear. It doesn't know what clear is. Like, what do you mean clear? Like, I like it a little foggy in here. Where's the smoke machine? So yeah. So
yeah, and I think that it gets so tricky too, because a part of us can never not project something like that. We always have our little filter, but at the same time, it's like, okay, where are we projecting, and then where are we maybe even like attracting people and situations that will fulfill what our expectations are, and it's like. It's such a tricky, nuanced thing, and I don't think it's something that we can ever fully, like, we can't ever be 100% objective. And I think that a part of this time is letting things be, like being okay with things being a little bit ambiguous and letting that happen, but then at the same time being conscious, Mercury conscious, that we may not be seeing things clearly, and like taking information with a grain of salt at this time.
Yeah. And, Shawna, I think it's actually pretty perfect that these two kind of come up in the time that they do, because really we're working in the dark cycle of the moon. When we have Mercury square Neptune, we're actually going to have the moon at 29 degrees of Virgo, right on that anaretic point there. And then when we have Venus trine Neptune, we actually will have the moon conjunct in Scorpio, conjunct Venus and Jupiter. Yes, it is pretty sweet. So basically, we can kind of filter this Venus conjunct Jupiter, which will also be still in orb with that. Venus trine Neptune will still be in orb of that Venus conjunct Jupiter that we were just talking about. And then the moon will join it. So I'm wondering if early on in the week we might have a little difficulty with that, focusing on any details as the moon's in Virgo. And if things just might be we might be a little confused about something, or working through some idealism issues that we might have, and then maybe we can open up to some of these impulses later on in the week, because we are in the dark side of the moon, which means we're meant to be intuiting and processing and taking some downtime, which Neptune usually likes. Neptune's like, can I have a moment? I'm not feeling so spunky right now. I'd rather just kind of lay down, maybe get me in a hot tub or something. But which sounds great, by the way. But yeah, Shawna, how do you see kind of that dark influence of the moon kind of allowing us to have a moment to take a moment and do some intuiting?
Yeah, I think taking a moment is 100% appropriate during this time. Um, and I think that it's physically taking a moment and then also mentally taking a moment as well. So I think it's a great time to let ourselves have that downtime, have that rest, have that. The dark of the moon almost reminds me of like a cocoon phase, like where I'm like, okay, I want to get into my cocoon. I don't want to talk to anyone.
AKA Snuggie.
Yeah, my Snuggie. I'm not yet the butterfly, And then, so I think that a part of that is like physically giving ourselves spaces to do that, especially like you're saying earlier in the week. And then also like mentally doing that. And that can look like shutting off the cell phone or closing the laptop. And because the thing with Neptune is it can also facilitate feelings where we kind of get like wrapped up in the future or in the past, and we go into like imagination land. And sometimes if we're feeling stressed, it can go into fear or feeling like things are wrong, and just like going into like a potential future that may never even happen. And so I think that the more that we can provide that cocoon for ourselves and then provide ourselves with just space to like write or do something that's fun and kind of like to your creative. I love the hot tub idea. I'm just saying that sounds great too. Or, take a bath, anything like that, so that we're getting that space, and it's not necessarily numbing or zoning out on your phone. It's like doing something that is actually really nourishing and lets you like unfurl in a most healthy way.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that, because what Neptune wants us to do is essentially kind of allow the flow. And so if we can put ourselves in these situations, like Shawna was just saying, taking a moment, maybe doing a creative activity, writing, journaling, having something where we can get in that flow, meditation, especially if you're able earlier on in the week to take a moment and center yourself while going within and just letting certain ideas come in and flow. Because that's the thing is like, when Neptune arrives, spirit is essentially kicked up a bit. And so in order to kind of intuit that spirit correctly, I think we have to be more open and less likely to put our own agendas on it. Because when we put the agenda on it, that's when we get that kind of rose-colored glasses or that idealism of what we think it should look like, because the imagination is so strong. It's like, why picture it this way? It looks good this way. Why not? But if we open ourselves up, I feel like we might download some things right now that will really kind of set us up for things like the new moon that's coming up that we're about to talk about, or this Venus conjunct Jupiter action. So there really is, and especially since we're talking about two water signs, as far as Venus and Neptune are concerned, being in Scorpio and Pisces right now, going with the flow is kind of the best thing we can do, I think. So don't try to like make too many like big decisions or, because practicality is going to be a little on the difficult side earlier on in the week. And that's okay. That's totally okay. Relax, dream, be creative, do what you need to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think I love what you said, Mel, about losing the agenda. It's more like this is not, to me, this doesn't feel like a week where we push our own agenda or our own, thoughts onto something. It's more like you're talking about being open and kind of going like moment to moment, day by day, and what feels good.
Yeah. And yes, so we're going to reinforce that. We're definitely going to reinforce it in our next segment when we talk about Mars square Pluto, because that is not an aspect you want to force any agenda on. But we will get there. We will get there in a second. But, I think the fact that we have Venus trine Neptune and Venus is conjunct Jupiter and the moon's there at all time, midweek, I think we're really going to be healing in some way, whether it's very apparent or if it's something that is happening within, that it's like so slowly merging that we don't even realize, we're being healed in some way. I think that's going to be very beneficial. So, I mean, how can it not be? We're talking about Venus. We're talking about Jupiter. Hopefully, it'll be good. So let's talk about these tarot cards, these Neptunian tarot. And I drew the Emperor as the focus and Judgment as the grounding, which at first I was like, what? I'm like, what does that have to do with Neptune? The more I realize it and the more we do these tarot segments within the transits, especially pairs of transits and through the week, I think they tend to pick up on the picture as a whole rather than our sussing out particular things to talk about. But as far as the Emperor and Judgment's concerned, I think it can go a couple ways, but I really think that we have some type of new consciousness around, what it is we are trying to achieve and what we're trying to put form around and boundaries around, especially, in Scorpio, which is all about boundaries. So how can we actively protect that now that new information is coming in? How can we put some form around it as we intuit it, in a sense. And to be honest, like Neptune really is about dissolving certain ego restrictions as well, which a lot of times would come up with Judgment because we are, we're coming to terms with something. So it's like, can we restrict that ego impulse and confine it enough to shine some light and wisdom in? If we're always trying to direct certain things, especially if we're talking about, we're going to be talking about Mars here in a second, which has been brewing. How can we dissolve the ego enough in order to give us that greater stability within our own inner authority? Beneficial inner authority. So Shawna, I mean, what do you think about the Emperor and Judgment?
Yeah, so these to me are speaking about how it is that we actually have that sense of authority when we don't try to manufacture it. When we're like, hey, this is me, and the Judgment card, the people are literally nude, and they're just like, hey, this is who I am, and I don't have to put on any kind of front or any kind of, like we were talking about, agenda or anything like that, and that the power can actually come from that place. And I think that it's a lot about letting go of trying to manipulate a situation to be a certain way. And that's where the like things actually flow when we do that.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Like, I think that, if we're going to be focusing on finding greater stability within the truth in some aspect, because, we are about to talk about some Mars and Pluto going on here. But essentially, I think, especially now we're intuiting things with Neptune, we're in Scorpio, where we're unearthing a lot of things from that have been hidden beneath or have lied in the dark. And so when we unearth things like that, essentially we find the truth of a matter that we didn't know before. And that's essentially what Judgment is. So now that we are we are intuiting this truth, it's coming in, we're starting to understand it more, and more of a spiritual truth than anything, so now that it can't be ignored any longer, essentially we have to protect and honor the information that is coming to us right now. So how can we find that, greater stability within the truth of ourselves? And that's a big order. but
easier said than done.
Yeah, easier said than done. But that's Scorpio for you. So yeah, some questions to take away now that we've dived into this Neptunian realms. I would ask myself, where am I opening up to greater understanding and purpose? Is my head in spiritual connection with my heart? I would ask, with the potential difficulty regarding lack of focus, how can I open up to a more intuitive and receptive approach? Do I need some downtime to embrace the messages coming in? And then lastly, I would ask, with this new consciousness developing, can I find greater stability by honoring the truth of what I now know? Can I find renewal within my own inner authority?
Nice.
So just some takeaways as we contact Neptune. All right, Shawna, so let's go into our last, but certainly not least segment and kind of what we've been brewing all week here. And so we're going to talk about Mercury, who will be sextile to Mars, and Mars is square to Pluto, and we have that new moon in Scorpio. And so we are deeming this massive ambition. And some exacts on that, we're going to have Mercury sextile Mars on Friday, November 17th at 6:25 a.m. Pacific time, which is 2:25 p.m. Universal time, and Saturday the 18th at 12:25 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that sextile will happen at 16 degrees Sagittarius and Libra. Then we have Mars, who is going to square Pluto on Sunday, November 19th at 4:11 a.m. Pacific time, which is 12:11 p.m. Universal time and 10:11 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that square will happen at 17 degrees Libra and Capricorn. And last but certainly not least, we have our new moon in Scorpio, which is going to happen Saturday, November 18th. At 3:42 a.m. Pacific time, which is 11:42 a.m. Universal time, and 9:42 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that conjunction is going to happen at 26 degrees Scorpio. So, Shawna, kick us in with your last quote.
So in this quote, she's speaking about working with the dark goddess. If we throw ourselves into the flames of desire and then dance with her in the refining fire, how will our everyday lives be changed? If we really do believe that she, the goddess, holds the whole world in the palm of her love, how do we live with that sacramental truth at our center? And I was like, oh, this is totally Mars, Pluto, Scorpio, like all of that. Because so Pluto is about that refining, that being in yoga. There's a word tapas, which is about being cleansed by heat. Basically, it's about being refined. It's this process of alchemy, and so this is all related to Pluto and Scorpio. And when we have Mars in the mix, there is maybe this desire to throw ourselves into something that is quite intense. There may be a lot of heat that's happening around this transit. And so I thought this quote was really perfect for this combination.
Yes, there will be some heat, which is so funny because we don't have none of the signs are within fire signs I can see, but still Mars brings that heat. And I know we're going to be talking about three things within one here, but I think the main theme, and maybe the one we should start out upon, is this Mars square Pluto, because it has been brewing for a while now, and it's not the easiest of aspects. It really isn't, because our deepest desires are aroused in some way, and because of that, it can be a volatile period because we're trying to passionately pursue certain things in our life, and a lot of times we are challenged by those desires when Mars squares Pluto, and so we have to develop some type of strategy to work within that framework, because we were saying earlier in the episode, and we're definitely going to reiterate it now, is that forcing any situation to suit your own needs is going to backfire. It will backfire, especially if you're trying to get an upper hand on something, because that's the thing is Mars wants to assert itself and, be like, oh, this is what I want, blah, blah. And Pluto's like, well, I want control of the situation, especially in Capricorn. So chances are, you might feel compelled to be like, oh, well, but I want this. I have to make it happen, and especially with Libra, Mars in Libra, where Mars doesn't, much like Venus and Scorpio, Mars in Libra is in its detriment. So it doesn't necessarily perform that well there. So our Mars impulse is down for a couple reasons right now. And especially with that Mercury, who is sextile to Mars. Let me speak from experience by having Mercury sextile Mars in my chart and Mars not being in the best position at all times for me, is that, chances are things can come out of the mouth right now that will just get you in trouble. Like, it's flowing. It's like, yeah, you can say things and your mind's quick and it's all thinking. We've moved past that. We've moved past that earlier Mercury square Neptune, and now we're like, oh wait, I'm pretty decisive. I'm fired up about certain things. But watch out for that. How you express yourself right now, especially since they're all talking. Mars is the center point here, especially being the ruler of the new moon, which we're going to talk about in a second. So yeah, I would say don't try to push that agenda. And most importantly, think about what you say before you express yourself, because sometimes you can't backpedal out of it. Speaking from experience. So Shawna, what do you think about that?
Yeah. So with the Mercury portion, that reminds me of like, have you ever had where you get into a conflict and then someone says something and you don't know what to say, and then later, like that night or the next day, you're like, man, I should have, like, you come up with all the best comebacks and you come up with some really good ones. This may not be the best week to actually like say those comebacks later. Like, I feel like that's how we may feel, especially with Mercury, Neptune earlier in the week, where we feel kind of fuzzy, and then now we're like, I know what I want to say. Yeah. But is it necessary? Is it kind? Is it going to help the situation? And then I think, so I think the part of this too with the Mars and Pluto together is we're going to be feeling intense. This combination, Mars and Pluto, it can often denote where anger may come up to be expressed, or like you were saying, Mel, control of a situation. And so I think that the solution to this, what we do with it, is we need to do something with this. It's not going to help us to deny it. And to try and make it not exist. It reminds me of, I was watching an interview with Beyonce, and she was talking about how when she's really fired up, like when she's pissed about something, she uses, like, that's when her best performances are. And she actually uses that in her work. And so I think that's what I want us to all think about during this time, is when we're feeling really amped up, to ask ourselves, are we trying to control a person or a situation, or are we taking that anger and using it towards our ambitions, like towards creation, really, like towards creating something versus trying to control a person or a situation?
Yeah, that's a great, it's interesting, with Beyonce saying that, because I totally relate to that. And maybe it's just because I've been in an aggressive punk band that I've been able to channel those types of things before. Like when I'm angry about something, I'll write a song about it. Or at a show, if someone pisses me off, especially because if you're playing aggressive music, a lot of times you get aggressive folks that like to respond to your aggressive music. And so people would piss me off when we'd play. And so I would just channel that anger back into the music, which made it that much more powerful. And, which in tune got the audience going even more. So I don't know how well that, that works, but yeah, how can we constructively turn this around to use this passion and this intensity, and what could be a volatile period into one that is more productive, that allows us to work through certain challenges, and make some ground based around our own desires, but to do so in a way that is done calmly enough, and to, if we have to work through with other people, have some air of compromise and cooperation, especially since we're talking about Mars in Libra. So, no, it's true. How can we rechannel that? How can we take it away from its initiated original target that will get us in trouble, and redirect that energy into something that empowers us or helps us make something, artful in a sense. So don't die on us, Shawna. We need you.
Sorry, I hold that one in.
Wrong tube. So let's set up a little timeline here before we jump into new moon talk. And that is, so basically we're going to have Mercury, who will make that helpful sextile to Mars, which we have to discern which part is helpful first. And so the moon will still be in Scorpio at that time, and will actually be sextile to Pluto. So we'll have some, our consciousness will be talking to Pluto in some way, which will then impart to Mars later. But basically we have that new moon in Scorpio, and then we have the Mars square Pluto, where at that time we will have the moon in Sagittarius. So our emotions are going to be, and our reactive selves are going to be a little more fired up. I guess that's where we get our fire. Now that I think about it, Shawna, I spoke too soon. So we will have a little fire behind that Mars square Pluto as we begin our waxing cycle. The moon's now starting to move forward with some new things. And it's very important, I think, that when we have this new moon, the day before, the first day or so of a new moon is where we can light cast some certain intentions and kind of focus on what it is we're manifesting or seeding during this month. So how can we do so consciously so that we aren't setting up intentions that are on the negative side of Mars square Pluto, because that can bring more into our lives. So Shawna, what do you think about that, and how maybe this tense aspect might impact our new moon somehow?
Yeah, so I think that because it's so close, it's so close in time, I think it's definitely influential. And so I would say the more that we can go into those dark feelings that we may be feeling, the uncomfortable things, especially anger or frustration or resentment. I almost see it as we need to flush out those things. And the new moon, it's especially the days before the dark of the new moon, is a really great time to do that. And so the new moon, I see it almost as this simultaneous releasing of things and then allowing new things to come in. It makes me think of what I'll do when I cleanse my house, which I did yesterday, is I'll use sage first in an intention to clear out stagnant energy, to clear anything that's accumulated, just a cleanse. And then I'll use Palo Santo for blessings, for bringing in new and fresh and beautiful energy. And so I think with this new moon in particular, it's going to be really beneficial to release, but then also say, okay, what is it now that I want to come in? And I think it needs to include both, because if we don't look at the shadow side, if we don't look at situations where we may feel shame or guilt or anger, that's going to continue with us. So I think it's important to look at it so that we can shift things. Yeah.
I think that's a very good idea, because we are essentially this new moon is triggering a healing cycle. And so how can we heal unless we look at the issues? Especially if we're triggered by the issues at the beginning of the waxing cycle, it gives us something to work on for the month, right? It gives us the issue to basically set us up for this new moon, so that we can have that wave of healing come in. So I guess let's talk about that, Shawna. Let's talk about the new moon and what we can expect from a new moon in Scorpio, regardless of the transits that are happening around it, which are very important, of course, because we're talking about the new moon ruler, which is Mars. Traditionally, modern would be Pluto, or the combination of Mars and Pluto, which we have both on board. So no matter who you think, both have their hands in this new moon. But yeah, I really like what you were saying, Shawna, about just having something come up to where we have to kind of test ourselves with this dark matter, and how we can heal from it, and honoring the changes of the season. Because that's the thing, is like Scorpio is this dark part of the year because things are changing, and that's what Scorpio is associated with. It's like we have new considerations, things fall away, just like fall, the leaves leave the trees, and just like the leaves, certain things leave our lives during this time. But what it does is it sets us up for that change and transition that we essentially are going to be going through. And a lot of times when you have that change and transition, especially when we're talking about Scorpio, we might be called upon to put some new boundaries in our lives, like start to honor, where it is that we're changing. And when we make changes internally, a lot of times we have to put that form and that boundary, make those boundaries clear on the outside of us. So I think that the new moon is really going to give us an oomph to our personal power and what it is we desire, just as long as we don't get caught up in the fact that that personal power and desire will be squaring Pluto. So I think that's where it comes in with what you're saying, Shawna, about because it squares Pluto, it's going to pull out that dark matter and challenge us with it. Mm-hmm. So that was a mouthful, but I mean, what do you think about this? What do you think about this Scorpio new moon? And just, what are we starting here?
Yeah. So I think this new moon in Scorpio, to look at it individually, it is this transitional time. So even though Scorpio is a fixed sign, and there can be this like fixation on certain things, it is a transition, because it's that point when in the northern hemisphere we're in fall, in the southern hemisphere we're in spring. And so it's like something is falling away, something is metaphorically dying, fall time, and then something is coming, something new life, new growth is happening. And it's kind of like happening all at the same time. Mm. And so I think when there's a new moon in the sign of Scorpio, we get to connect with each of those pieces. We get to connect with what it is that needs to fall away. And then we also get to connect with where is it that there is new growth, but where is it that down to our bare bones that is always there for us? Where is our inner resilience? And I think that's what the new moon in Scorpio may remind us of, is how it is that we are resilient, and how it is that we can connect with that part of ourselves that is always strong, that always knows that everything will be okay, and always knows that that we are very resourceful.
I like that. And it just came to my mind about how we are incorporating Mercury into this, and also Mars. And so maybe even though Scorpio is essentially that fixed sign, that fixed, saying fixated energy, we have Mercury, who is now in Sagittarius, who is in that mutable energy, who is in the transition. The mind can transition in a sense, and be open to changes and going with the flow. And then we have Mars squaring Pluto, which might not be comfortable, but essentially we are in cardinal signs, so we can initiate some type of action at the beginning of this new moon that maybe puts us more in line with certain integrities and boundaries in our lives, and where our desires are, and to build our own inner strength in a sense. So it seems like during this new moon, we actually have a taste of all of the modalities. We have that starting energy of that Libra Mars. We have that fixedness of that new moon in Scorpio, and then the mutability of that Mercury in Sagittarius. So what do you think about that, Shawna? Like maybe those helping in the process?
Yeah, it's like all systems go.
I know.
everyone is down in the party. Yeah, and I think that can be a helpful thing. It to be honest, it may feel a little bit overwhelming, I think. But at the same time, it could be helpful to have almost like a little sprinkling of all of the things. Because with so much, this is the thing too, is with Scorpio, with so much Scorpio. So at this time, we're going to have the new moon, the sun, the moon, Venus, and then Jupiter, all in Scorpio. Scorpio can have us, can create like this fixation, like where we're like, I must investigate this. I must figure this out, and it, like kind of tunnel vision. And so, it is a nice resource to have that cardinal and mutable energy, like break things up. It makes me think like if we have like a pot or a pan that's been like, we've cooked something and it's like crusted over and it's all gross because we didn't wash it right away. Like, the mutable and the cardinal energy is like soaking it and then breaking it up so that we can wash away the mess.
Oh, I like that.
I know that's a weird example. But
I know it's not, it maybe, but it worked really well. I was right there with you. And that's the thing is like, once again, I know we were talking about this earlier in the episode is, and we've been talking about this for the last couple episodes, is Scorpio can be an unpleasant thing. But essentially it's also getting you somewhere that could be beneficial in the long run. It's just maybe painful during the process, or challenging, or something that it just gets us out of our comfort zone, because it's essentially shaking us out of that kind of polarity of Taurus, which is that rigidity and comfortable quality that gets us maybe stuck because we stay in this zone of comfort. And Scorpio's like, I don't need no comfort. I need to shake some things up here. I need to, get some new birth into my life somehow. And so I think that this is just that time of year, and we are going to be doing that.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mel. I think people forget that Scorpio has like a full bandwidth for feeling. And so it can feel intense, but I would also remind everyone too that the more that we feel all of the feelings that are hard to feel, the more capacity we have for joy and happiness too. And they may not all come at the same moment, but we're like stretching out our bandwidth for feeling different things.
Yeah.
Both good and bad.
Both good and bad. It has happened. And that's the thing is like, especially since we're having Jupiter connections this week, and Jupiter kind of ties into the idea of good and bad and morality and what is beneficial and what might not be. And that's the thing is you might never know. And I heard, it's so funny. I keep having this pop up in the episode as I'm thinking about I was watching a TV show last night. I don't even remember which one or whatever, but they talked about a Chinese, proverb or story, and I'm going to probably botch it all to hell, and you might even know what I'm talking about. But it's about like a farmer who he lost his horse. You know what I'm talking about?
Tell it.
Yeah, he lost his you might need to help me out on this, but he lost his horse, and then everybody's like, or someone comes and he's like, oh, aren't you upset about it? Or isn't this a bad thing? He's like, good or bad, who knows, essentially. One might never know. And so then the horse comes back and it's got a whole field of a whole bunch of wild horses with it. And they're like, oh, that's wonderful. And he's like, oh, good or bad, you never know. And then the wild horse, his son rides one of the wild horses, and he gets bucked off and loses a leg. And then the guy's like, well, this is terrible. And the guy's like, well, good or bad, you just never know. And then the army comes in and they're looking to recruit people for the war. And then his son doesn't go off to war because he is crippled. And so he got out of that. And he's like, that's wonderful. And the guy's like, good or bad, you never know. And this keeps going. But the thing is that, you have tragedy or potentially good things that happen in your life, but you really don't know the inevitability of it, like how it's going to be in the end and how it impacts your life further down the road. It's fortune. I guess what I'm getting at here is fortune is subjective. So keep that in mind as we're going through all these Scorpio transits, because because when Scorpio brings certain things that are painful or difficult to deal with, or unearth certain aspects in our life that we might not want to look at, or changes that we might not want to be a part of, keep that in mind, is that fortune is subjective. You don't know what's down the road. So just go with the flow the best you can, is essentially what I'm saying here.
Yeah, I love that story, and I wholeheartedly agree.
So I wish I could tell you what that story is and where you could read it in its right entirety, but I can't. If any of you listeners out there know, share it with us, and then we will share it with everybody else. So yeah. But that being said, Shawna, let's get into these tarot cards right quick, because they add another interesting layer onto what we're talking about here. And so for the new moon and Mars, I drew 10 of Pentacles as the focus and the Magician as the grounding. So the Magician is back again. The Magician was here last week. So, once again, we're tapping into that, those talents and skills that we have. And like Shawna was saying earlier, how Scorpio, all those resources are within. So chances are we're going to be actively searching, for greater support. And when we use our own talents and skills, like how can we find greater support with the community, greater wealth within ourselves, or the wealth that we need to make this happen. So how can we use our power to essentially share our gifts with the community in some way? And that's just one aspect of how this cards can come together. But Shawna, tell me what you think about the 10 of Pentacles and the Magician.
Yeah, so this is a cool combination, because I think that it speaks to using our ambition and using our drive in a powerful way. Because the 10 of Pentacles, it is about success and wealth. And when I think of wealth, I think of not just material wealth, but also spiritual wealth. And, how do we get these things that we want? How do we become successful? And I think that the Magician is like, hey, you have everything that you need to create it. The Magician is like the ultimate manifesting card. It's like we can create. The Magician also reminds me of this process of alchemy too, because on the card it looks like he's doing this alchemical process, and he's combining earth energy with spirit energy. And so I think it's a reminder to do just that, to combine our physical resources, but then also our inner or our spiritual resources as well, to create what it is that we truly want. Yes,
I totally agree. And what's interesting, Shawna, is like a lesser known interpretation of the 10 of Pentacles, perhaps, is like if you look at the traditional Rider-Waite tarot, usually it's a family, it's a husband and a wife. I'm assuming that's just I'm just assuming that's what it is. And this little boy, and they're all like headed towards their castle, but that little boy is looking back. And because it's a 10, a lot of times this can kind of represent some type of transition or change, or maybe like that little boy who's looking back, we might feel like something is missing from our lives in some way, even though we essentially have it all. We have the support of our people, we have a solid ground base, we have our loved ones, but something's missing. And that might play into the desire, especially that Mars square Pluto action. But really, because the Magician's there, if you feel that way, if you feel like something's missing from your life, you have within your own powers to bring about what it is that's missing. You have all those resources. And essentially, especially while we're in Scorpio, and we're coming out of a long Saturn and Sagittarius cycle, I'm hoping that a lot of us have greater, maturity and wisdom regarding a lot of things in our lives now, that we've been looking at these big picture questions, especially since Saturn's been in Sagittarius for the last 2.5 years. And that's a whole nother thing, but just everything that we've been working on, essentially, I think we've all been making a lot of changes and transitions in our life to bring in a greater sense of maturity and wisdom. And so now we can take this magician who is here to be like, yeah, you're a creative person. Use that creativity. Focus that will. Create new and supportive conditions for you, whether or not you're already in there or you are trying to get there. So yeah, I think this new moon can really help us, seems to really help us get in touch with our manifestation abilities and owning our personal power in order to do so, I think.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. I think it is a good reminder to going back to that Scorpio vibe, the Mars and Pluto even too, to be really honest with what it is that we want, and that that our anger or frustration can point to where it is there's something that's missing, and that it's okay that we want something that's missing, as long as we go about it in a helpful way, in a way that's empowering.
Yes, that's perfect. That's perfect way for us to wrap up this tarot segment. So, all right. So some questions to take away from this for our new moon in Scorpio. And we've got our Mars contact squaring Pluto and sextile to Mercury. I would ask myself, with this new wave of healing energy coming in, what do I want to light cast? What is it I would like to heal? How do I actively take a role in that? I would ask, with my deepest desires being challenged, how can I develop strategies to work effectively with others? Can I use cooperation and compromise rather than force to achieve my own ends? And then lastly, I would ask, where must I focus my will to create new and supportive conditions in my life? Can I use my talents and skills to nurture my massive ambitions?
Nice.
So yeah, Shawna, how are we going to do this?
Oh, holy moly.
How are we going to do this? All right. So what have we learned? Oh my goodness. This week has a lot of. Well, we learned that Venus is going to conjunct Jupiter in Scorpio early on in the week, and we are inviting some intriguing mysteries in our lives to basically take a look at and to intuit some information that comes to us from spirit. We know that we have Mercury, who is going to square Neptune earlier on in the week, and then we have Venus, who will trine it about midweek. And so we are really tapping into how to spiritually connect the head with the heart. And then we learned that Mercury is going to sextile Mars. Mars is going to square Pluto, and we're going to have a new moon in Scorpio all at the same time. So we're going to be tapping into that massive ambition. We're going to be watching how we forcefully exert ourselves and doing so in a very not concentrated manner, but what I'm talking about. What am I talking about, Shawna? Careful matter. Yeah. And we're going to watch what we say to some extent. But essentially, we're setting us up for some new conditions that are going to put us in a more powerful position aligned with our desires. So, Shawna, I know that you have an excellent action item to share with our listeners. So please do.
Yeah, so this is a three-parter. So this earlier in the week, I want you to write a letter. So you're not going to mail this, but it's a letter. And so it can be to yourself. It can be to someone that you really have something that is on your chest that's been weighing on you that you want to say. But I want you to write a letter to someone to express something that has been on your mind, something that's been bothering you, and something, it's extra good and juicy if it's a letter that you would never ever send. That's really what I'm going for. And so I'm going to write that, and then, you can tuck it away, you can tear it up, you can even burn it if you want to, but do whatever feels appropriate. And then after you send that letter, take a shower, go into a bath, do the hot tub thing, whatever, shower is most accessible for most of us. And as you're taking the shower, I want you to close your eyes and imagine that light is running over you, that the water is actually light, and it can be white or it can be purple. And just imagine that everything is being washed away. All of those words, all of those feelings, and all of those emotions. And so this, you can do this, as many times as you like, but I think earlier in the week it could be helpful. Maybe if you're feeling really intense, it's something that you do during the new moon over the weekend as well. But I like that because it combines a lot of these aspects where it's like we're having the Neptune energy earlier in the week. We're feeling a little murky, and then maybe we have something that we want to say later in the week, and the writing gets it out, and then the wash helps to energetically cleanse and clear and integrate everything afterwards.
I love it. That's so perfect. Writing is so therapeutic, I think, and especially earlier on in the week, Shawna, we still have some Virgo moon action going on. So I know Virgo would like to get in there, write some things down, and then, yeah, I love it. It's perfect.
Yeah. And so other ways to get involved with the podcast are to get involved with us on social media, to comment or to tag us, let us know how you're doing and how you're working through this energy. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram under Feminine Principle Podcast. And of course, another way to get involved is to become a patron of the podcast to show your appreciation and to get those super cool show notes. And again, you can find that on Facebook, Instagram, or you can go to feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com.
Yes, because those show notes really do help. They help Shawna and I, and hopefully they help our patrons that have already signed up. And we definitely have. We were just talking about a new thing we might get going here in a second. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, so if you need to find us beyond our dual presence over at the Feminine Principle Podcast, you can find me at energeticprinciples.com. And you can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Energetic Principles. So Shawna, where can they find you?
You can find me at Neo Feminine Astrology on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Yes. So we are here for you throughout the week. We always have fun content going on. And the same with our Instagram page at Feminine Principle Podcast. Shawna's been adding some quotes for our featured authors and books over each week. So it's great to take a look at that because you get to really dive into some more words from the people that we are featuring each week. So thank you, Shawna, for doing that because it really helps engage beyond, even the podcast. I love it. So
definitely.
So that being said, Shawna, any last words for our listeners?
Yeah, sending lots of love and asking that if you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. That helps us to reach even more people because we come up sooner on the search. And yeah, make sure that you subscribe as well to get future episodes the moment that they're uploaded.
Yes, and they come out on midnight on Sundays Pacific time. So if you are a subscriber, I'm pretty sure it just downloads right away and you can wake up the next day and have a listen. So yes, please subscribe. And if you are feeling anything about this, the episodes or want to reach out, we'd love to hear from you. So hit us up. So yeah, well, Shawna, another week of astro. And it's going to be an exciting one at that. So, I as well, thank you so much for tuning in. So until next time, may the stars be with you.
Namaste.